everybody. I'm really excited to be joined today by Katey Finnegan, and we're going to dive into the topic of smallholder farmers, which is close to both of our hearts. And before we get into that, I'm hoping, Katey, can you give us a little bit more background on yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here. And hi, everybody. My name is Katey Finnegan. I'm based in San Francisco, California, and I'm an independent consultant that is really focused on building more socially just and regenerative food systems, both locally or domestically and internationally. I work with companies, mostly food and beverage companies, as well as NGOs, nonprofits, and other food system actors on sustainability strategies, supply chain resilience projects, and other type of food systems initiatives. And but the main thing I do want to share is that I'm just really, I think, like you, Mel, really enthusiastic about farmers and farming and supporting them, and in particular, smaller scale farms. Farming is just such a crucial business and role in our society, and one that I think is really undervalued and under-supported, under-resourced. And farmers and farm workers do incredibly hard, like back-breaking work to provide us with not only the food that sustains us, but also some like lovely things that we enjoy and feel like we can't live without, like our coffee or our tea or our chocolate. And I also really believe that when we do support farmers and send the right market signals and provide them with the right opportunities and resources, that farming can also be done in a way that supports environmental ecosystems that is not degrading to the environment or kind of driving climate change. There is a world in which farming and ecosystem building can work together as well. So that's what I'm really enthusiastic about and a bit about what I do.
Wow, very beautiful. And I definitely think that there's a lot you said that people often don't think about. I myself am a backyard gardener, so I have my small little plot, and I'm super proud of the one carrot I grew. And I think to myself, with that one carrot I pulled out of the ground, like if I go to the store and I buy 2 pounds of carrots, like it was backbreaking for my one single carrot. And
Mhm.
it definitely goes unnoticed. And I feel like I was hopeful around the pandemic, which is a weird statement to say because I think a lot of farm workers, especially in California, where I was also living at the time, got a lot of spotlight because they are so invisible and they're really not thought about in the supply chain, but they do such backbreaking and integral work to our society. So yeah, couldn't agree more. Now, when we were talking, you mentioned a little like small scale. I usually say smallholder
Mhm.
farmer. I think that that's not that commonplace for people who aren't like you and I and working in this all the time. Could you talk to us a little bit about what you mean when you say that and why those specific kinds of farmers are so integral to the coffee or the other specialty products that we know and love?
Yeah, so I think for the purpose of today's conversation, we'll focus a bit more on smallholder farmers in the global south, in particular, Africa, Latin America, Asia. There are smallholder, small scale farmers in the US, but the scale is a little bit different. Globally, when we talk about smallholder farmers, it's typically somebody who has under 5 acres of land, where in the US, there's not an official definition, but it's more like under 50 acres, maybe. So
Okay.
the scale is
A little
different.
bigger. Yeah.
But globally, there are 500 million smallholder farmers across the world, and these farms support 2 billion livelihoods, so like a fourth of the world's population. Um, what is really important about smallholder farming is that these households and these families who have small farms are not only supporting producing food for their homes and their communities and even supply chains within their countries, but like I alluded to earlier, these individuals are often growing products or ingredients that we here in the US really love and think that we can't live without, like coffee, tea, chocolate, spices, really delicious products that we enjoy. And I think that oftentimes when we're grabbing those products at the store, drinking them, consuming them in the morning, we're not really understanding the people at the other end who are doing that work and all that it takes for that product to get from the ground in that country to our cups or our plate here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those figures that you threw out are pretty remarkable. One that usually comes up for my mind is also that most of these smallholder farmers are living on less than $2 a day. So we're also talking about very hardworking, but not very high earning individuals, unfortunately, for all the work that backbreaking work that they're doing. And I think that for me personally, one of the things that I have thought about working in some of these supply chains that you mentioned is that I've had the privilege, and I know you have too, to work directly with those farmers or to know those farmers. But so often when you go to the supermarket and you buy a product or you think about something that's been imported in a super multi-country, multi-complexity supply chain, there's so many humans at every node of that supply chain that we're not often thinking about, but all of their hands and their hard labor has made that product possible. And I think one thing that also comes to mind for me, um, you know, the farming's not easy, right? And there's a lot more challenges that they're facing today than they might have faced in the past, but it's never been an easy place to work. And I'm curious if we could dig into a little bit some of the things that they're really facing in today's world.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned the less than $2 a day. A stat I often bring up as well is when we're looking, annually, most smallholders globally earn less than 1,500 a year. So that's just another marker that kind of is a helpful comparison. So overall, income and having enough income to support, their children to go to school, health expenses, basic living expenses, is certainly a challenge that many smallholders face. And that also limits their ability to reinvest in their farms and kind of grow their farms as a business as well. There are a long list of challenges, and unfortunately, I don't know if we have the time to get into like all of them in detail, but I'll talk through some of them. Limited land size is one of them. We talk about them being smallholder farmers. Access to land and land rights it can be a particular challenge, especially for women in a lot of these contexts. So just the one of the main constraints is actually their land size, and you can only grow a certain amount of food or product on a small size of land. When we're looking at global supply chains, another big challenge is often farmers' lack of agency and power in that supply chain. Oftentimes, especially when they are resource and cash constrained, they are selling their products to the first middleman that comes by their house. Or maybe and this kind of leads to the next challenge is like overall lack of resources. Perhaps they have a product that can be stored. And if they did store it, they could sell it when the market price is highest. But maybe they don't have that storage facility. Or coming to another challenge, they might not have that market information. So oftentimes these farmers, they're in very, very remote locations, often not as like digitally connected as many of us as well. So understanding or knowing the kind of most up-to-date market prices or market information is only based on what they're hearing from certain middlemen who are coming out to their communities. Speaking of remote locations, oftentimes like physical infrastructure and roads is also a challenge. It can take hours and hours and hours to get out to farms, therefore making it really hard for them to procure inputs or labor, other resources that are necessary for their farm work as well. And sometimes too, a lack of technical assistance or people who can provide additional agronomic training, or like when a new disease comes in, it can be hard for them to access the resources to gain the information of, okay, what do I do? Like this is some new disease that's cropped up. Which then again ties into another challenge, which is one that's increasing, particularly for smallholder farmers, is volatile weather conditions. Harsher rains, longer droughts, unpredictable weather that really throws off the timing of different activities on the farm, or can wash a whole crop out, or introduce new diseases that they haven't seen, or new pests that they like lack or are not sure how to combat. So there's a variety of different challenges, whether it's, generally bucketed, I would say, into like lack of agency, information, inputs, and finance. Finance is another piece I mentioned, or I didn't mention, but is an important aspect as of well, like both savings as well as access to credit or other tools to be investing in their farm work.
Yeah. Great summary. And I was going to bring that one up. So glad you touched on it. I think one thing that we take for granted is being able to go to the bank and get a loan or even just to have a place to store our money. And for a lot of farmers who are thinking about the next crop or the next harvest, it's challenging to do if you can't think about pre-putting the money up for fertilizer or whatever it is that you need to think about the season
Yeah.
ahead. Yeah,
Especially when your work is seasonal as well and your
exactly.
cash flow is not consistent throughout the year. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that that's common no matter what specific supply chain we're talking about. If you're talking about smallholder farmers, it's a really, really big challenge. Now, one thing you did bring up, which I want to linger on a second, is global warming and kind of these extreme weather events that are happening more drastically, more frequently, and with much more challenging predictability. So it's not, the same preparations that they can have. What I've been noticing is that all of this transformation is happening a lot faster than a lot of smallholders can even think about adapting to. But one of the challenges that I've also noticed is that most of climate financing, about three-quarters of it, is going towards mitigation as opposed to adaptation. And when we talk about mitigation, it's basically dealing with the after effects as opposed to being proactive and thinking about how one can adapt to what might come. So definitely would love to talk a little bit about what you think are some key methodologies for improving farmer livelihoods, potentially improving adaptation or thinking ahead, and where, your work really plays in that space.
Yeah, I think that there are a variety of tools for adaptation, and I think on like the larger scale, there are organizations doing research at like a regional level on climate change and like land suitability and climate suitability for different crops, which is like a longer term, I think, look at like what should a farmer be growing in a particular region and whether or
Hmm.
not certain crops are even viable in the long run. But I think when we're talking about more immediate steps, I think that's where I get really excited, particularly about more regenerative practices and practices that can help build the soil health of the farm that, increases water retention in areas where perhaps they might experience more drought or areas where then there's a ton of rain. Farms that are, building up their soil health, then it enables that water to like filter through and be captured rather than just like washing out that top layer that's all eroded and ruining their whole farm. Um, so again, like the actual practices, of course, really depend on the geographic context and the crop and the area. But to me, that if I were, working on a particular project or within a supply chain, I think working with agronomists to really figure out what those practices are for that environment, there's a lot that can be done for adaptation through practices that build soil health.
Absolutely. I think that, the soil is the fruit and the feeding point of most of the agricultural plants, so it's super key.
Yeah.
Now, if we're taking like bigger picture about improving farmer livelihoods, are there certain methodologies that you prefer most?
Yeah, I would say I do like to kind of bucket things just so that I can organize them in my own head. And the three kind of main buckets that I see are um, building resilience, growing income, and increasing farmer agency. And the resilience piece, and I'll actually touch a bit too on a bit back on that adaptation question. When it comes to climate resilience, in particular, there are, I think there is a lot of opportunity for access to insurance for mitigation
Mhm.
as well. And again, looking at the finance piece, supporting farmers to um, improve their business skills and organize their farm as a business and collect more savings to be able to kind of self-fund when certain challenges arrive, improve like farm business resilience. There's both like climate resilience and then business resilience as well. And then diversifying sales channels. And this again is where regenerative practices can come into play. Might be intercropping a new crop that is either sold in the local market or the export market. So you're diversifying your crops, and or diversifying your sales channels of your actual mix of buyers who you're selling to as well. And then there's also opportunities for some off-farm income generation. And here's where I'm a big fan of increasing value add, whether it's like community scale, women's cooperative, doing parboiling of the rice, and not
Mhm.
just selling off the raw rice, Or on like a larger scale, I just to shout out a particular company, Beyond Good Chocolate in Madagascar has built a chocolate processing factory in Madagascar next to where the cocoa is grown. And so the cocoa is not getting shipped off to Europe to be turned into chocolate. Things are staying in Madagascar and not only kind of shortening that supply chain, but building more value for the farming communities and creating jobs, more jobs in that area as well. When it comes to income, I would say this is like slightly more basic, although again, the approaches can really vary. But you're looking at how you can support farmers to improve their yields, improve the quality, increase the price that they receive, or reduce the costs in farming. And again, this is going to look really different based on the product and that farm's like P&L sheet essentially. But those are the different levers you can look at. And then one that I'm excited about that I feel like isn't mentioned as much is the sense of agency. And this here is increasing access to information. Like I said, not only agronomic skills, but price information, weather information, and then building market power. This is often done through farmer groups, creating farmer groups or building cooperatives. And then also shortening the supply chain. I'm a big proponent of brands that use direct trade models. So then that consumer dollar that's going to buying the product, that kind of share that goes back to the farmer, is a lot higher than when there are many middlemen within the supply chain.
Absolutely. And I think you teed up my last question just perfectly. So, thinking about individuals who might be listening or those that work for brands, what do you feel are the best ways to empower smallholder communities?
Yeah, I really do think like the number one way for brands and companies to empower smallholder farmers is to either start or shift to more of a direct trade relationship or this relationship that supports increased value add at that country level. Another company that I'll mention that I admire is Pachamama Coffee and their cooperative model. And so at the end of the year, their cooperatives are all co-owners of the business, the cooperatives of growers. And so the profits at the end of the year are distributed back to the farmers through the cooperative. So they're not only, earning their income off of sales of coffee, but they ultimately are invested in the kind of growth and success of the business as a whole. And then, yeah, there are a lot of really amazing direct trade companies out there, like Simply, Diaspora Co., Good Sam. There are a lot of incredible models. I will recognize that that can be hard to transition to if a brand wasn't started out that way. So I would still say there's opportunities in providing premiums for certifications like fair trade, fair for life, organic, a lot of the regenerative certifications, and a lot of, I think I will call out too, it's maybe less known, but a lot of the certifications, the regenerative certifications include farmer livelihood aspects as well. So they're not just about improving the environment, but also supporting the farmers and the laborers in the supply chain as well. And of course, working with reliable ingredient suppliers too, if you're not doing a direct trade model, look at your suppliers. Do they really provide traceability? Are they giving you as the brand, the opportunity to connect with the farmers in your supply chain? And then I also highlight that companies can invest specifically like in tailored projects within their supply chain as well. Right now, I'm working with Hue Chocolate, which is a great chocolate company that sources their cocoa from Sierra Leone, and in partnership with Solidaridad, which is an NGO in Sierra Leone, we've designed and are implementing a project to support farmers in their supply chain to improve their farming practices and their post-harvest practices to improve the quality of chocolate. So again, through both increased yield and increased quality, the farmers in their supply chain can earn more for the coffee and then also earn more for selling a higher volume. And so if there's not necessarily that opportunity to like shift your whole supply chain to a different model, you can also look at, having a more direct impact by just investing in a specific project. I know, like as someone who is, clearly invested in this area, I still also recognize that as a consumer and a shopper, it can sometimes feel really overwhelming, especially when you're in the grocery store and there's so many different options. To all the consumers out there, I'd say number one, when you're thinking about produce in particular, I would vouch for supporting local farms, like joining a CSA, shopping at your farmer's market. It's a really, really great way to, again, invest in your community and your local economy and start to get to know like where your food is produced and who's doing it in your area. But again, back to those products like chocolate, coffee that we all love. Here, I would say, of course, look out for those certifications when you're in the grocery store. But beyond that, I would say companies that are really investing in their supply chain are often telling stories because they know that consumers relate more to stories. So I also encourage you to not just like look at the label, but flip to the back of the pack because there will often be more information there. And again, if a company is sharing more specific information about where they're sourcing from, not just a country, but even a specific district or community, the more details there are, I'd say the more likely is that they have that knowledge. And then I would say just choose a couple of your favorite products, the ones that you buy the most, and take like 5 to 10 minutes to look online again at the company's website on their about page. If they're again really invested in sustainable sourcing, they should have sourcing principles or something like that on their about page. Sometimes it's a bit hidden in the FAQ section as well, so you can look there or you have to look at the blog posts, but just take 10 minutes. And you only do it for, the products that you care about or choose like a month at a time. Do like one product and look into it so it feels a little less overwhelming. But it does, I think it's worth it to do a bit of that research.
Yeah, I believe personally that consumers don't realize how much voting with their dollar and their buying power really, the impact that it has. And those were some really good tips. And I love the ideas as well for companies thinking about maybe revitalizing their supply chains. Couldn't thank you enough for taking this time to break down who smallholder farmers are, what their importance is, and how we might be able to support them.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks so much for having this conversation.